Hello everybody, this is MD Thornton83, and welcome to my first film review. Let me talk to you about a movie so bad, a movie so shit, and a movie that is an embarrassment to humanity and deserves to be in obscurity. The movie I am talking about is, of course, Evil in the Woods. Now, there has not been many reviews for Evil in the Woods in the past, but since this one is rather rare and obscure, that should come as no surprise. Now, for those of you who have never seen this movie before in your lives and are curious to know what it's about, allow me to clue you in. Wandering through the streets of Atlanta, Georgia with no parent or guardian whatsoever, a young boy named Billy Haynes journeys his way into a local library, where he checks out a book titled Evil in the Woods. The librarian tells the boy that the book is due back on Friday the 13th. Returning home, Billy starts reading through the first few pages of the book. And as he gets into the first few pages, the story is then visualized to the audience with a narrator with a highly annoying hunky-dory goofball southern accent.
Georgia,
where pure evil has reigned for 3,000 years.
The story then takes us back to 1956 in the town of Mildew, Georgia, where a film studio called Shadow Productions begins shooting a movie in the making. But as they venture out into the woods, strange things happen and they come across a variety of all the horror cliches, ranging from aliens, Bigfoots, werewolves, cannibals, and evil witches, all which seem to have been randomly placed in this movie for no particular reason. Okay now, first of all, I want to start by saying that I really don't have many positive things to say about this movie, but for as much as I don't want to review this, I might as well take this time to get it off my chest. Now, it's worth mentioning that I did not see this movie back when it first came out. In fact, I didn't even know about this movie until just recently when I was browsing through YouTube in my hopes of finding something new to get into. And so I stumbled across this one video titled Evil in the Woods, which of course is the name of the movie itself. Now, judging by the title, you'd expect this to be a horror movie of sorts. However, Evil in the Woods isn't quite what it is. In fact, it turned out being nothing more than a miserable, wretched, steaming sack of shit. And I mean that literally. This movie totally feels its age. But in fact, this movie feels way older than its age. Like about 100 years older. The story makes absolutely no sense, the acting is pathetic, the editing is horrendously amateur, and there is no focus or consistency whatsoever. In fact, this movie is so bad, so horrendous, and so uncreative that it seems like it was written by a 3-year-old or by someone with an extreme case of ADD. While this was probably intended to be more of a comedy or a spoof, there's relatively little humor to be found in this movie. In fact, nothing about this movie makes any sense. And everything that happens is at pure random. There's no rhyme or reason to anything that happens from beginning to end. And if you have the courage and the will to sit through the whole movie, which sadly I had to, you'll be scratching your head in confusion and disbelief at how unbelievably retarded this movie really is. This movie has puzzled me to the point of leaving me with so many unanswered questions. The first question I asked was, what the hell was a kid doing wandering the streets all by himself? He looks awfully young to be walking around the city without his parents or any kind of adult supervision, especially when there could be child molesters out there. Seriously, what were they thinking? Were they on crack when they wrote this script or something? The second question I asked is, what is up with that annoying-ass narrator? And why does he speak with a southern accent?
While our happy campers settle in, Barbara serves a gourmet breakfast as wee Billy explores the nasty, nasty woods.
Don't get me wrong, people. I have nothing against people with southern accents, but this is supposed to be a horror movie, right? And having a narrator with a hunky-dory southern accent just doesn't make any fucking sense. And nor does it fit the atmosphere of a film of this category. I mean, the whole point of a horror film is that it's supposed to be scary or suspenseful. But there is nothing scary, suspenseful, or engaging about this film at all. And that narrator doesn't help much either.
Unaware of the hour, a time of day when darkness falls on the land and all forest folk find their way home, our little explorer is persuaded by his new friends to come over and play.
Yeah, just go with it. Another thing that annoyed the shit out of me is that the narrator goes on and on about some evil that has ruled the land for 3,030 years or some shit like that.
Shadow Productions, the ultimate in modern movie technology, is about to encounter an evil 3,030 years old.
And due to how many times the word evil is used in this movie, you'd think that it would be some kind of entity or some kind of diabolical force. But in my point of view, the evil is essentially the sloppy mess that is this movie. And do you want to know what I found interesting? This movie was released in 1986. That was the year that saw the releases of Top Gun, Platoon, Flight of the Navigator, American Tail, Short Circuit, and the original Transformers movie. In fact, 1986 was a big year for movies, especially for lots of great classic movies that are still remembered today. Not that any other time didn't have its fair share of memorable films, of course, but Evil in the Woods is one of the few 80s films I know of that's actually that bad. I know that every point in time has had its ups and downs, and I admit that even the 80s had its fair share of goods, bads, and in-betweens. But Evil in the Woods is beyond any doubt one of the worst movies I have ever seen. Had I seen this when I was a kid, I bet I'd be pretty lost and confused, because even as a child, I knew what focus and consistency was, and this movie doesn't have either of those. Hell, I don't think I would even have the strength to sit through the whole thing. If you don't believe me on how bad this is, you'd have to actually watch the movie for yourself to get what I mean. But trust me, people, if you're a die-hard moviegoer who's expecting a detailed and in-depth plot and story with relatable characters and some consistency, then you're not going to find any of that here. I'm warning you, all you're gonna get is a complete mess that makes absolutely no sense, has bad writing, poor acting, and horrendous editing, has no focus or consistency at all, and isn't up to fucking standards for its fucking time! So anyway, as I digress from my outburst that I had there a couple of seconds ago, I regain my sanity once again after taking a few deep breaths. Anyway, as I was watching this movie, I was constantly scratching my head at the utter stupidity and the lack of effort that was put into it. Now, before I go any further, it's worth pointing out that Evil in the Woods was a low-budget film. But trust me, people, I've seen low-budget movies before, and none of them are anywhere near as bad as this wretched piece of crap. With the possible exception of Rotor, which of course was also a piece of shit, but still, there is nobody on this planet who could fuck up as badly as the makers of Evil in the Woods. I mean, not only is there no consistency or development, but even the production values of this movie suck. Now, I've already outlined the prologue sequence with the kid walking through the streets all by himself before checking out the book, which ironically was titled after the movie itself, so I don't really need to go over that again. But as for the whole movie itself, well, there's really not a whole lot to say, because like I said, everything that happens is at pure random. First, we get these bullshit scenes with the producers of Shadow Productions reciting their plans and ideas on how and where they'll start shooting their latest film. In the first half of the film, we get all these random scenes that have nothing to do with the story at all. Not that there was much of a story to begin with, of course. And they're just there to act as fillers. We see the actors playing out fake scenes that vary from monster attacks, to cheap-ass romance scenes, to a shitload of other crap that I can't even keep track of. All which is accompanied by the crappy editing. I mean, hell, you'd think that this movie is a compilation of blooper reels. And this persists all the way until we see them camping at night. Now, get ready, because now I'm gonna go over what really annoyed the shit out of me. The second half of the movie focuses, yeah, I said focus, on the production team as they journey into the woods where they'll start shooting their latest movie. But while that's going on, they discuss some random shit which again has nothing to do with the story.
Somehow I don't think that would have scared me so much if you hadn't just told us that story, Wolf.
Probably a dog or something. Come on, let's go to bed.
Isn't it beautiful up here? I'll take this over the city any day.
Not to mention, it was very poorly written and poorly executed by the actors themselves. Because again, the acting is just awful. And from there, we get even more random scenes that range from cannibals eating people, to werewolves attacking their victims, to aliens coming down to Earth in their flying saucers, to witches and their spells, and a whole bunch of other random shit that has no meaning or rhythm. In fact, how many times have I said random? Because I honestly can't keep track of how many times I've used that word, and nor could I keep up with how inconsistent this movie really is. Because as I was halfway through the film, I eventually started thinking to myself, what the fuck is going on here? Because every scene Because every scene in this movie seems to have been rushed with little to no development at all, and it seemed like they were trying to stitch 3 or 4 movies together in one, which makes the experience even more irritating and aggravating. Hell, this movie is so bad it makes the Titanic films look like a masterpiece. I guess there's no point in spoiling the ending, since none of you who are reading this review are ever going to want to see this miserable, wretched catastrophe of a movie. But if you're interested to know what happens at the end, then allow me the honors. After reading through the entire book, Billy's parents come into his room to tell him some good news. However, the kid just rests in his bed completely motionless and apparently dozed off. When his parents see what Billy was reading, the boy turns into a hideous mutated monstrosity, the door to his closet opens up to reveal a decomposed corpse, his parents freak out, and the last thing we see before the closing credits is the poster image on the wall for the band Iron Maiden. The end! So there you have it. That's my review on Evil in the Woods. And after watching this review, you may or may not be interested in watching such a movie. But I can assure you, you won't find this movie anywhere today. Not in stores, not online, and certainly not even on Netflix. In fact, I can imagine that this movie was not very popular even back in the year it first came out. Due to its rarity and obscurity, I can imagine that it didn't win any Academy Awards or gross much money at the box office. Hell, I bet this was a complete and utter failure which everybody wanted to forget about. It's no wonder this movie is so unknown. Very few people who have reviewed this consider it to be a cult classic, but in my point of view, this movie doesn't even come close to being a classic, especially not for a film that was made back in 1986. Besides, they had way better movies back then. Fortunately, this movie is not very well known even today, and I think that's for a good reason. Bottom line, Evil in the Woods is a movie that's worth avoiding. I don't care if you're a die-hard 80s fanatic, this movie is a piece of shit with a capital S. Watch any other horror film. Watch Night of the Living Dead, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Poltergeist, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Stephen King's It, Demon Knight, Resident Evil, 28 Days Later, or 30 Days of Night. Do not, and I repeat, do not watch this movie, because you will be traumatized for life. Because you will get so annoyed at the shitty acting, the crappy editing, the lack of focus and consistency, that annoying ass narrator, and all the random shit that happens, that it's just not even worth watching. End of story. Take my word for it. Anything blows this garbage right out of the window.